the computer had been silent for nearly 20 years. When the new owners of the farmhouse plugged it in, the old monitor flickered, whined, and then came alive in a pale green glow. A single message sat on the screen. 4 words, frozen in time. "He's here. Help me." It was dated November 14th, 2004. That was the night the world forgot about Sarah Dunley. The house sat on the outskirts of Meadowbrook, Kansas, a town where nothing much happened after dark and people kept their doors unlocked. But even in quiet towns, shadows fall long. The discovery came in 2023 when a young couple, Tyler and Erin McCoy, bought the abandoned property at an auction. They were planning to restore it, flip it, maybe make something out of the ruin that had sat decaying for nearly 2 decades. But that night, as thunder rolled over the plains and lightning flashed through the warped glass of the old living room, the house gave up one of its secrets. Tyler had found the computer in the basement, a beige Dell tower, dusty, cords tangled, a relic from a different age. He brought it upstairs, plugged it in, and waited for the hum of old machinery to start. The screen glowed faintly, like an eye-opening after a long sleep. "Guess it still works," he said, half joking, while Erin shined her phone light over the desk. Then the message appeared. No icons, no folders, no taskbar, just a blank document window, 4 words typed in the center, followed by a blinking cursor. "He's here. Help me." For a few seconds, they thought it was some kind of prank, maybe a leftover note from the previous owner. But when they tried to close the file, the computer froze. And then, as if responding, a faint noise echoed through the house, something metallic, shifting, deep in the floorboards. Erin whispered, "Did you hear that?" They turned off the computer, packed their things, and drove straight to the police station. Detective Daniel Rourke had been with the Meadowbrook Sheriff's Department for over 20 years. He remembered the case like a wound that never fully healed. November 14th, 2004, the night Sarah Dunley disappeared from her own home. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. Just her car still parked in the driveway and her shoes left neatly by the door. Her brother had found the house empty, the lights still on, dinner half eaten. The only thing missing was Sarah. For years, the case had gone nowhere. Locals whispered theories. She'd run off, joined someone, or maybe just walked into the endless fields and never came back. But Rourke had always known better. "People don't just vanish from a locked house," he used to say. Someone was in there with her. When the McCoys brought in the old computer, Rourke felt that same unease from years ago, the feeling of something left unfinished. The machine was sealed as evidence and sent to the forensics lab in Topeka. 2 days later, the results came back. The message file was real, time-stamped exactly at 11:42 p.m. on the night Sarah disappeared, and the last login on the system had been under her own username. The technician's note said the file had been manually saved, meaning Sarah typed it, pressed save, and never had the chance to send it or erase it. But there was something else. Embedded in the document's metadata was a secondary signature, another user profile that had accessed the file minutes later. The name, Guest. The basement of the Dunley house had always been a strange place. During the original investigation, it had been searched, photographed, cataloged. But back then, computers were simpler. Data wasn't what it is now. There was a desk, a chair, and a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. Now, with the property reopened, the police combed through it again. Beneath a layer of dust, Rourke found something odd. Scratches in the cement near the wall, as if something heavy had been dragged. He followed the marks to the corner, where the paint on the baseboard looked newer than the rest. He tapped it. Hollow. Within hours, the wall was partially dismantled, revealing a small crawl space barely 3 feet deep. Inside, wrapped in a mildewed blanket, were fragments of clothing, a set of car keys, and an old digital camera. The label on the side read, "Property of S. Dunley." Rourke's hands shook slightly as he lifted it into the evidence bag. When the lab extracted the memory card, they found 37 photographs, most of them ordinary. Friends, her dog, sunsets over the fields. But the last 3 were different. They were taken in the basement, dimly lit, showing the desk, the chair, and the computer. In the final photo, the camera faced the staircase. A faint silhouette stood at the top. Male, tall, head turned slightly toward the lens. No features visible, just a shadow in the glow of the basement light. The image shook something loose in Rourke's memory. In 2004, a neighbor named Kyle Redding had lived next door to Sarah. He was quiet, polite, worked maintenance at the local hardware store. He'd been questioned once after a witness reported seeing his truck near her driveway the night she vanished. He'd denied it, said he was home watching TV. His alibi had never been disproved, but something about him had always felt off. "We had nothing on him," Rourke said now, looking at the photo. But he had everything on her. As the case reopened, the town began to stir again. Reporters showed up, curious, as if Meadowbrook had been sleeping and someone had suddenly shaken it awake. People whispered at the diner, the post office, the gas station. "They found something at the Dunley place," they said. "Something in the basement." Rourke didn't talk to the press. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. But what he couldn't shake was the way the computer had come back to life, as if waiting all these years to speak. Late one night, after the others had gone home, Rourke sat alone in the evidence room, staring at the recovered desktop now running on an isolated power supply. The cursor still blinked beside the message, patient and silent. He opened the system logs. One line stood out. A remote access attempt logged 2 days after the disappearance. The IP trace led nowhere. It was a dial-up connection routed through a private network. But in the notes folder, another document sat hidden. The title read, Room 12. He opened it. Inside was a list of names, each one marked with a date and a number beside it. Coordinates, perhaps. And next to the last entry, S. Dunley, 1114, complete. Rourke leaned back, exhaling through his teeth. Whoever had written this hadn't planned on being found. The phrasing was clinical, cold, almost procedural. He felt that familiar pulse of dread in his throat, the same one from the first night he stood in that empty house all those years ago. Room 12, he muttered. "What the hell were you doing, Sarah?" The next morning, the investigation led them to a defunct motel off Highway 54, just outside of town. The sign was half collapsed, letters missing. Meadow Inn, daily, weekly. The manager, an older man named Harris, remembered Sarah. "She used to come by sometimes," he said. "Helped clean rooms for cash when times were tight." When asked about Room 12, his face changed. "That one's been locked up for years," he said quietly. "After the flood, We stopped renting it out. The door to room 12 groaned open under Rourke's flashlight. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and old water damage. Wallpaper peeled like skin. The floorboards were warped, soft from moisture. And in the far corner, beneath a cracked window, stood a rusted metal chair. On the wall behind it, faint indentations marked where nails had once held something. Photos, maybe. But there was more. The floor near the wall had been cut out, a perfect square, covered by a plywood board. When they lifted it, the stench hit like a wave. Beneath the panel lay a shallow cavity filled with debris and human remains. The coroner would later confirm. Female, early 30s, consistent with Sarah Dunley. It took Rourke several minutes before he could speak. The silence of the room pressed against him, thick and unrelenting. The motel's broken window let in a strip of sunlight that cut through the dust, illuminating the space where the chair stood. He felt the air shift. For the first time in years, the case wasn't just a memory. It was real again, tangible, undeniable. Back at the station, the forensics team uncovered more evidence from the computer logs. It turned out that the file Room 12 wasn't created by Sarah at all. It was made under the guest account 2 days before her disappearance. The timestamps matched the exact hours when Kyle Redding's work records showed he had clocked out early from the hardware store. The pieces were starting to fit. Painfully, inevitably, Rourke drove out to Redding's old address. The house was empty now, sold years ago, but neighbors remembered him. He left town not long after she went missing, one said. Said he got a job up in Wichita. Never came back. A background check revealed no recent activity, no employment, no driver's license renewals. It was as if he'd gone dark. But when Rourke traced the serial number on the old computer's hard drive, the manufacturer's report revealed something chilling. The part had originally been sold to a local hardware store in 2001, purchased in bulk by the same manager who'd once employed Redding. That night, Rourke couldn't sleep. The past and present swirled together in his mind. The blinking cursor, the basement, the motel, the shadow on the stairs. Every thread pointed back to the same man. But where was he now? The answer came 3 days later, when a call came in from Wichita PD. A maintenance worker had been found dead in a trailer on the outskirts of the city. The ID matched. Kyle Redding, 49. Heart failure, alone, with no next of kin. Rourke drove out anyway. Inside the trailer, surrounded by tools, wires, and old electronics, they found a single shelf lined with labeled VHS tapes, each marked by date and first name. One of them read, Sarah, 1114. He stared at it for a long moment before slipping it into an evidence bag. Somewhere between disgust and relief, a thought surfaced, sharp and quiet. Some things never stay buried. They just wait for someone to turn the power back on. The tape crackled before it played. Detective Rourke stood in the dim light of the Wichita evidence room, the hum of the old VCR filling the silence. The image flickered, washed out in the way that only aging magnetic film could look. Colors drained, edges soft. The first few seconds were empty, static and muffled breathing. Then the frame steadied. A woman sat in a chair, wrists bound to the armrests with duct tape. Her eyes were open, unfocused, her hair matted with sweat. Sarah Dunley. The timestamp in the corner read 11:13 p.m., November 14th, 2004. The same night she typed those 4 words. Rourke didn't speak. He just watched. A man's voice came from off-screen, low, flat, with the faintest tremor of anticipation. "You said you wanted to know what it feels like to be watched," he said. "Now you do." The camera moved slightly as he circled her. His face never appeared fully in the frame, just his hands, the hem of a work jacket, a flash of something metallic at his belt. He asked her questions, ordinary things that twisted into something darker. Where she was born, what she feared most, who she told about him. She answered softly, her voice cracking. "No one. I didn't tell anyone." He didn't believe her. At 11:42 p.m., Sarah turned her head toward the camera. Her lips moved, but the audio distorted, her voice breaking apart into static. Then the tape went black. The final frame before it cut off showed the computer monitor glowing behind her. The same message she'd managed to type before it all went silent. "He's here. Help me." Rourke shut the tape off. His reflection hovered faintly on the darkened screen. He'd seen horror before, but there was something about the stillness of that room, the intimacy of it, that felt like intrusion. The realization hit him slowly. Kyle Redding hadn't just killed her. He'd watched her die, and then stayed long enough to make sure she'd never be found. The autopsy confirmed it. Cause of death: asphyxiation. Estimated time of death matched the timestamp on the tape. There was no doubt now. But even with Redding dead, the case felt unfinished. Someone else had touched that computer. Someone had left that file accessible, had reopened it after Redding's death, and had somehow sent the message back into the world 2 decades later. Forensics dug deeper into the metadata. They discovered something strange after years. Offline, the system had connected briefly to a local network on October 30th, 2023, 2 weeks before the McCoys moved in. A single remote access command traced to an address in Topeka, a library, specifically the Kansas Digital Archive branch, where local cold case files were stored. Rourke drove there the next day. The library was modern, all glass and quiet hums of computers, but underneath it carried the same smell every archive has: paper, dust, time. He introduced himself to the systems administrator, a young woman named Beth Laird, who recognized the case instantly. "Everyone here knows about Sarah Dunley," she said. "It's one of those stories that never really left this town." When he asked about the remote access, she frowned and checked her logs. "That's impossible," she said. "Our system isn't connected to any private machines." But when she ran a deeper trace, her expression changed. "Wait, there was one unauthorized session last month. Someone tried to open restricted case archives. The IP was masked, but they used an internal login. Guest." The word hit him like a bell tolling from somewhere far away. Rourke requested security footage from the same night. The images were grainy, black and white, time-stamped around midnight. At first, nothing. Just empty aisles. Then, at 12:03 a.m., a faint flicker in the frame. Movement near the back of the digital record section. The figure was barely visible, tall, thin, wearing a jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. They walked slowly between the terminals, stopped at one, and leaned over the keyboard. The lights flickered once. When they came back on, the figure was gone. "Could be a glitch," Beth offered. "Our cameras have been acting up for months." But Rourke knew better. The same kind of flicker had been caught once before, on the tape from the basement, right before the power went out. He drove back to Meadowbrook that night, through the rain, the roads shining like wet glass. The Dunley farmhouse stood dark against the horizon, the fields whispering with wind. He parked out front, headlights off, and just sat there, staring at the window where Sarah had once stood. Inside, the computer still sat on the desk, boxed as evidence, but connected to power for analysis. The glow of the monitor was faint through the curtain, a ghostly pulse in the dark. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, and the floor creaked beneath him. The air was colder than it should have been. He made his way to the desk and stared at the screen. The message was gone. The document was closed. In its place, the desktop displayed a single new file. No title, just a timestamp. 11:14 recorded. He hesitated, then clicked it. At first, static. Then an image, grainy, distorted, but real. The basement. The camera faced the computer, and in the chair sat a man. His head was bowed, hands limp at his sides. The angle shifted slightly as if someone, or something, had set the camera to record remotely. The man lifted his head slowly, and Rourke's breath caught. It was Kyle Redding. But it wasn't 2004 footage. The file metadata showed it was recorded on October 30th, 2023, the same day the system had been accessed. Redding looked older, hollow, the lines on his face deeper than in any of his photos. His eyes moved toward the camera, glassy but aware. "I don't sleep anymore," he said quietly. "Every night, she's here, in the wires and the walls. She never stopped typing." He paused, breathing shallow. You think time buries things, but it doesn't. It just learns how to hide them. The image trembled, flickered, and cut to black. Rourke felt the blood drain from his face. The timestamp couldn't lie. The recording had been made 3 days before Redding's death in Wichita. Somehow, he'd come back to the house, the same place he'd killed her, and left one last message behind. Forensics would later confirm that the camera used was identical to the one Sarah owned, the one found hidden behind the wall. But the data raised more questions than it answered. Why had Redding returned? Who had activated the computer after all these years? Rourke searched the basement again, this time with a forensic team. Beneath the floorboards, they discovered a network of old wires, thin, spliced cables that didn't connect to any active outlet. They traced them along the wall, up through the floor, and into the attic. There, tucked behind insulation and dust, was another small device, an analog transmitter, the kind used for early home surveillance. It was connected to a long, dead battery pack, and beside it, a stack of tapes, each labeled by date, each one beginning the same week Sarah disappeared. Rourke played one. It showed nothing but the upstairs hallway. Still, quiet, except for the sound of footsteps late at night. Then, faintly, a voice whispered. A woman's voice. "He's here." He stopped the tape. The hair on his arms stood up. The voice wasn't coming from the tape. It was live. He turned. The old computer's monitor upstairs had flickered back to life, faint blue light bleeding through the cracks in the floorboards. They rushed down. On the screen, the message had returned, the same one as before. But this time, another line had appeared beneath it. "He's here. Help me." Then, "He won't leave." Rourke's partner, Deputy Maddox, looked at him. "Is this some kind of script? A playback?" But the cursor kept moving, typing slowly, letter by letter. "I told him I forgave him. He stayed anyway." Rourke froze. The words matched the phrasing from Nancy Greer's note, the one found years earlier in another cold case. It was impossible. But there it was. Like the dead were borrowing each other's voices. The lights flickered once, twice. Then the computer shut down completely. The rest of the night blurred into reports and procedures. Power failure, system anomaly, equipment impounded. But Rourke couldn't let it go. He took the hard drive home, against protocol, and spent hours watching the footage frame by frame. He didn't find any new clues, but he did notice something no one else had. In one frame, barely visible, was a reflection in the computer monitor. A woman's face, pale, expressionless, hair falling over one eye, staring straight into the lens. He leaned closer, adjusting the playback. In the faint glow beneath her face, another reflection appeared, his own, standing behind her. He shut the monitor off and sat back in the dark. Outside, the Kansas wind moaned across the plains, long and low. Somewhere far off, thunder rumbled. He told himself it was nothing more than interference, light, pareidolia. But deep down, he knew better. When the final report was filed, the case officially closed. The remains confirmed, the killer identified, justice recorded. But for Rourke, closure never came. The farmhouse was sold again, though no one stayed long. Locals said they heard typing at night, even after the power was cut. Others claimed to see a light in the basement window, faint but steady, like a computer waiting for someone to read what it still had to say. Months later, Rourke received a package at his office. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, low resolution, printed on cheap paper. It showed a desk, a computer, and a glowing monitor. On the screen were 2 lines of text. The first, "He's here. Help me." The second, "You're next to find." He looked up instinctively, the hum of his office suddenly deafening. His reflection stared back from the window, pale against the night outside. The fields beyond the town stretched endlessly into darkness, and for a fleeting second, he thought he saw a faint blue light flicker between them. Steady, waiting, alive. He closed the blinds, slid the photo into his desk, and sat there in silence. The cursor in his memory still blinked, patient and eternal, reminder that some messages never stop sending. And somewhere in the plains of Kansas, in a farmhouse that should have stayed quiet, the old computer hummed again. The monitor woke with a soft click. The document opened by itself. The cursor blinked once. Then words began to type across the screen. Slow, deliberate, each stroke echoing through the empty rooms. "She's still here.